Hello, you beautiful people. My name is Brian Brushwood, and I'm here to answer the real question that all of you guys had coming into this program. I know this isn't going to be some kind of pie-in-the-sky, high-minded theoretical stuff. I'm going to give you the boots on the ground, real work on how to advance this frame. There you go. How to fake an erotic fiction bestseller. That's what we're going to learn. First of all, there's some things you got to know. The story begins about 10 years ago, and you should know that I used to look like this, but now I look like this. Don't panic. I used to tour all around the United States doing a punk rock blood and guts magic show. I shoved nails in my eyes. I ate fire. That was my full-time job. And I had an idea for a show, because after each of these programs, the students at each of the colleges would take me out, and I would do magic for them. And essentially, I would teach them how to scam free beers. And so I had the idea for what came to be known as Scam School. I pitched it. The idea was, be the most interesting person in the room. Capture everybody's attention. Provide so much value that when you get to some kind of unbeatable challenge or puzzle, you end up getting somebody to agree to buy you a free drink. What are we, 10 years later now, we're at a point now, Scam School is now over 1 million subscribers. It's a little bit hard to see. Let me see if I can enhance this. Enhance. There we go. Okay, good. It's been a long journey to get there, and there's been a few lessons I've learned on the way. Now, keep in mind, there's a few moments during this talk that I'm going to talk as if I know something. I know nothing. I'm an idiot who eats fire, shoves nails in his eyes. However, I've read some really good books, including Robert Cialdini's Influence, where I learned about the idea of fixed action patterns. These are psychological backdoors that sit in the back of your mind, something that cause immediate stimulus response actions. We see them in mating behaviors of animals of all varieties. And one of the most powerful ones is the psychological backdoor number one is liking. The idea is when you like someone, you're much more likely to grant them a favor, do some work for them, or give them something. And I figured out that you can use the liking psychological backdoor to get out of speeding tickets. I realized that 100% of the time, every time I've ever made a police officer laugh, he's left me off the hook. And most of the time that happens immediately because my license looked like this. If they were continuing to press, I would say, they'd ask for the insurance. I'd say, oh, I'm sorry, officer, this is a rental. I don't have my insurance, but I'm told, this will help. And sometimes they would let you off the hook. Second psychological backdoor is reciprocation. Turns out that as human beings, we want to balance the scales. Whenever we're given something, we want to pay people back, even if we actively dislike the other party. The Hare Krishnas figured this out. Back in the 1960s, they made a lot of attention by banging on drums and making a lot of noise. However, they weren't able to get a lot of donations that way. So they figured out that if they handed people flowers and said, here's a gift, enjoy this flower. By the way, would you like to make a donation? People would often donate. Then they would go throw the flower in the trash, they would go pick the flower out of the trash, and then they'd give it to someone, hi, here's a flower, would you like to make a donation? And pretty much that's the philosophy to score free drinks at the bar that we do on Scam School. Reciprocation and liking. Liking because you're engaging with the other person, you're looking them in the eye, you're trying to make them smile and entertain them. Reciprocation because you're giving something of value. You're giving a magic trick or a performance, and it ends up looking something like this.
Got a friend? You won't after this prank.
I believe it's called lateral force, but for some reason, if you stick a quarter to your forehead like this, and you hit your head on the table, it will not fall off. I've never been able to do it in fewer than 3 hits. It's not till the 4th time that it actually will come off. I mean, I'll buy your drinks for the rest of the night. If you're able to get the quarter to fall off in less than 3 hits. And then we'll just go ahead, we'll stick that on. All right, you got it? Go for it, go for it.
In less than 3.
In less than 3, go.
Wow, I'm getting myself a seat.
Go, keep going. You're almost there. It's getting loose. Come on, you're almost there. You got to do it. You got to really put the muscle into it.
That's it.
So the idea is simple. It turns out that those nerve endings on your forehead have a bit of a lag, and it feels like the coin is still there on your forehead. So you could take advantage of that and be a total jerk. But out of everything I've learned, both in the stage show, both in the launch of Scam School and its rise to prominence, is that out of all the fixed action patterns, of all the psychological backdoors, the most powerful, in my opinion, is social proof. Social proof is the reason we pay attention to other people. It's the reason we have laugh tracks on sitcoms. It's the reason we pay attention to Yelp reviews. It's the reason McDonald's brags about having billions and billions of burgers sold. It's because there is a comfort in knowing. This is a heuristic. This is a shortcut that's not always right, but right enough of the time that we rely on it, because if everybody else is doing it, odds are it's probably a good idea. So I don't want to brag about Scam School, but pretty much the moment it came out, everybody loved it, right? They thought that I looked great. They thought that my hairstyle was super rad. No, obviously none of that's true. But we did end up at this over 1 million mark. So what happened? If there's one moment I could point to that fundamentally transformed the trajectory of Scam School, it would have been when I performed for a show called Dig Nation. There was a podcast that was very, very popular called Dig Nation that I opened for. This was 2 months after Scam School started. I was doing my stage show, fire eating, shoving nails in the eyes and all that. And I stopped in the middle of the show, because I realized what I lacked was a platform. I didn't have a team on my side. I was unknown, but I needed to figure out the right idea to court them on my side and what to do with that energy. I realized everybody out here loved new media. They loved podcasting. They loved YouTube. They loved the idea that they were part of a revolution against old media. So in the middle of my stage magic show, I stopped and gave a PowerPoint presentation, much like you're seeing now, of the fact that all of new media was dominated by old media faces, NPR, Oprah, 60 Minutes, all this stuff. And I said, wouldn't it be great if we could wrestle control, the #1 spot away from old media? And I proposed a scam that we would all, I guess I pretty much proposed a conspiracy. I said, let's all try to scam the iTunes algorithm, because at the time, very little was known about the iTunes algorithm. It was known that in general, it seemed to monitor the number of new subscriptions in 4-hour blocks. So I said, what if all of us, by the way, everyone follow me at Brian at twitter.com/Wood, and then at one moment, we are all going to hit subscribe at the exact same time. And if this works, we'll stick it to the man by making it into the top 10. And it worked. It worked. We all hit subscribe at one time. It's probably 1,000, maybe 2,000 people. But it was enough that we hit the #3 and #7 spots. This was my first lesson in the power of social proof. Because at this point, we thought, hey, we blew up the Death Star. Good game, team. We high-fived each other and went home. But the mere fact that we were in the top 10 created its own engine of attention. And 1 week later, by virtue of having gotten to the top 10 once, we were still in the top 10, #4 and #9. So at this point, we had garnered the attention of the Apple staff. We ended up being a staff pick at some moment. Later on, we ended up getting picked as a top podcast of 2008. It's kind of hard to see. Let me enhance this. There we go. Okay, good. There we go. But the attention itself ended up generating more attention. And so this is the moment where the story gets a little bit weird. 2012. By this point, I had written a couple of books for Scam School. The first book, we had told everybody buy it at the same time and all that stuff. Everybody did a targeted strike. We blew up the Death Star. It was the #1 bestseller on iTunes. When it came to the second book, though, I ran into a problem, because this happened at the exact same time as the cultural phenomenon of 50 Shades of Grey. Now, there's some fantastic articles breaking down why 50 Shades of Grey was a dominant force. There's all kinds of things from the efforts, the boots-on-the-ground efforts, the community that was built by E.L. James, and all this stuff. All I know is I was covered in naked jealousy and annoyed that this cultural phenomenon was keeping my book from being #1. So a friend of mine who co-wrote the book jokingly said, well, look at all these other books that seem to have the exact same motif as 50 Shades of Grey. Maybe the next book should look like a 50 Shades of Grey book. And we laughed. It was like, wait, what if we wrote a 50 Shades of Grey book? And then we laughed, and we thought, wait, what if we got our fans to write a 50 Shades of Grey book? And then we were on to something, because I do a podcast every Tuesday night called Night Attack. Me and my co-host, Justin Robert Young, we had the idea, what if we set up the characters, the situation, and the places, and then we just had the fans open up a Google Doc, have the internet write an erotic fiction book, and see if we could steal the #1 slot, which clearly is a cultural phenomenon. So we put together something called the Diamond Club. The idea was simple. First of all, I had a cover that looked like a 50 Shades of Grey book. And by the way, none of this is new. We're pretty much ripping off the idea of Naked Came the Stranger. Back in the 1960s, there was a journalist who gathered together 20 or so of his best friend writers, and they came up with a pseudonym, and they decided to publish a erotic fiction novel about a woman who had sex with anything that would move. And so we wanted to do the exact same thing. But Naked Came the Stranger was very much of its time. There were beatnik poets and all these artifacts of the 60s. So we said, well, let's do the same thing. Let's make it very much of the mid to early 2010s. So we set it in Silicon Valley. We made it about a woman who had co-founded a startup only to be jilted by her lover, and who found out that he had married someone else. And to get revenge, she discovers a sex club called the Diamond Club. And we put together our own pseudonymous author. Patricia Harkins Bradley, by the way, is a mashup of both of our third grade teachers' names. And we told the internet to write, we had to cull a little bit of some of the saucier chapters that we got. But we put together this thing. We published it on an ebook platform. But think back to that moment when I was able to pitch the idea of Scam School being a #1 podcast. We needed energy. We needed an audience that would have a stake in the game. Now, a subscription is free. Anyone can click subscribe and be part of a prank, and that feels good. What we needed was people to spend 99 cents on this prank. So we realized we needed to look for an audience that was feeling something. And regardless of whether you understood, try to remember, in 2012, nobody really understood what was happening with the 50 Shades of Grey phenomenon, right? There was this mass confusion. So we went to those people and say, do you not understand what's happening either? Great, let's set fire to something. So we put together a video
Hey guys,
that we pitched to
Brushwood.
the internet here.
Justin Robert Young.
We host a comedy show on the internet.
Yeah, we do. Bullshit.
So we're looking at the top 10 ebooks on the iBookstore, and we noticed something.
Yeah. I mean, 50 Shades of Grey is on there, and that makes a whole lot of sense because a lot of people buy it. But you want to know what else is on there? Bunch of books that just look like 50 Shades of Grey. They're just poorly written erotic fiction meant to cash in on an obvious trend.
So we developed a theory that we'd like to test today.
What if we had the internet write a book?
We have not read the book.
And it was all just completely crowdsourced and had little cohesion amongst the chapters and just delivered on bang it.
Our book.
All right, so that was our pitch to the audience. We went out to the biggest group of rapscallions on the internet, Reddit, who apparently also liked the idea, and they a bunch of people voted it up. And sure enough, when this thing launched, it actually this photograph right here shows it at 4th place. It actually hit 3rd place and supplanted one of the E.L. James books at the time. But at that point, we're like, high five! How cool! We did it! And we knew it was our people because all of the readers also bought were either books written by me or one of my co-hosts. So it's like, okay, that's our people. Pretty cool. We were able to generate a little bit of publicity. It was fun to go on some shows and talk about the phenomenon. Oh, and by the way, this is my favorite part. We knew that a bunch of people would write 5-star reviews because they were into the idea of trying to, scam their way into the top slot. And we knew that there would be some reactions of 1-star reviews of people saying, hey guys, this is all a big prank. Don't stop enjoying this book. But our favorite were the 3-star reviews that said, well, I mean, it delivered on what I wanted. Wasn't great. So sure enough, though, the power of social proof was so compelling that this is when everything launched. Everything was our books and our friends' books. 1 week later, very different set of users had also bought. So in this case, we had made our way into the pantheon of erotic fiction through no fault of our own. In fact, our favorite moments was discovering real fans of fictitious Patricia Harkins Bradley. It was a fascinating experience, and I will go to the mat claiming. You know, people are saying, oh, this is a fake book, this is a fake this, fake that. If you look at that 5-star, 1-star curve, I'm going to guarantee you it's identical to 50 Shades of Grey. And all of the negative reviews are identical to the complaints about 50 Shades of Grey. But if there's one thing if there is some way that I've come out ahead, we did a run of about 100 physical copies of the book. Just to make this program, I went and looked, and apparently those physical copies are now being sold for $10,000. Mission accomplished. So whatever it is you do, make sure to take advantage of those psychological backdoors, liking, reciprocation, and authority, and of course, never underestimate the value of social proof. Thank you very much, guys.